Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway, welcome to another video. A little bit of a sad one for you today though, because it's going to be all about classes of British steam locomotive, of which there are no surviving members. So, as you know, very unfortunately in this country, towards the end of the 1950s and throughout the early 60s, many of our beloved steam locomotives were cut up and scrapped and never seen again. It was a terrible time really for steam enthusiasts. Now obviously many steam locomotives have been preserved. We had to rely a lot of the time on just private individuals who were willing to spend their own money and preserve some of these engines. So we are lucky to have lots of preserved locomotives. But either way, thousands and thousands were cut up and scrapped, like I say. So this video is going to be dedicated to those. I have done videos similar to this in the past. If you want to check them out, I will include a link up there. But in those videos, I only covered around 6 or 9 locos per video. Now that's no good these days. I'm going to kick it up a notch and show you 30. So I've trawled through my entire collection. I've found 30 locomotives from classes of which there were no survivors whatsoever. And just think what a good job the manufacturers have done of representing locos that were not preserved. It's amazing that we've still got them in model form. Obviously it's no substitute, I'd rather have the real thing, but it's nice to still have these. So without any further ado, let's take you and take a look. So there's no particular reason for this other than the fact that I'm a bit weird, but I've decided to group these loosely based on region. So we've got some LNER locomotives to start with, or at least Northern region engines. First of all, some freighters, some 280s. So the first one here is the Thompson 01. I know most people don't like Thompson, so maybe some are quite glad none of those were preserved. Also the Tango, that was not a Thompson, that was a Gresley, who of course was revered deeply, so yeah, quite a shame none of those were preserved. Behind there, obviously not a freighter, this is a much more beautiful looking passenger locomotive, the D16, quite heartbreakingly none of those were preserved either, which is a great shame. Behind her we have, if I get any of these wrong or it turns out any of these really were preserved, please do let me know. But this is a J39, pretty sure none of those were preserved. I always struggle to remember the class of that, so hopefully I got that right. Then we have a few tank engines. We have the V3 tank engine, which is quite a beautiful design, I always find. Yeah, really like the look of that. And then a similar L1 behind it there, which I think was another Thompson design. And those were quite rightly all scrapped because apparently they were really unreliable. If I remember correctly, the axles used to wear away or something like that. Yeah, not great stuff. Behind that then we have quite a popular engine for whatever reason, the J50 tank engine, got a very unique shape to it, that one. Also a Gresley design, none of those were saved. I think there were plans at some point to to rebuild one. Whether that's still happening or not, I'm not too sure. Then we have the J83, sort of smaller tank engine, as you can tell, that's a BR1, but apparently none of those were preserved. Behind there we have, right at the back of the turntable, the J11. I think that was a Robinson design, although I could be wrong. Quite an early loco anyway, that one. Scrapped. Then we have the K3 Mogul. I think that one was a Gresley, wasn't it? Yeah, pretty sure it was. Number 1935, beautiful, that, great shame that those were scrapped. Another design here is just, I think this is a Gresley as well, yeah, this is the B17. My particular example is Gilwell Park, but they were all scrapped. Then all the way across to the right hand side we have the P2 Cock of the North, and this one was scrapped and then had salt rubbed into the wound because of course Thompson came along and rebuilt it and effectively ruined the class. And then a little while after that the rebuilds were then scrapped, so we lost those twice effectively. So there we go, there's a quick look at some of the LNER engines. I think the next lot is LMS. So the next engine is this, the G2A. Now when I've showed this before and said they were all scrapped, I've had loads of people say, no, one has been preserved. I don't think they sounded like that, by the way, but yeah, that's what people said. Now, I mean, you can take this or leave it. Basically, I think there was one G2 that was preserved, but this is the G2A variant and none of those were preserved. So yeah, it's there. If you want to consider that one preserved, you can do, but that particular example was scrapped. Next along, a truly fascinating locomotive known as the Turbomotive, so named because it was powered by turbines as opposed to normal cylinders. That one was rebuilt into something that resembled more of a Princess class, and then it was scrapped, so yeah, quite a shame. And then I think, no, it wasn't scrapped, it had a terrible accident, didn't it, if I remember correctly. Either way, it got busted, that's for sure. Then we, that's an odd turn of phrase. Then we have the Patriot. This is the Bachmann Patriot, but I don't think any of the Patriots survived, did they? Hopefully that's correct. It's a shame because they're beautiful, aren't they? Once again, though, I think a new Patriot is going to be built, which is great. A few tank engines next then. We have the Stanier is it 264? Yes, I always forget whether it's a 264 or a 462, more like a Pacific. Very handsome machine, isn't it, that one? But unfortunately, yes, none were preserved. Just like the next tank engine, which is similar, also a 264, that's the Fowler version, the 4P it's known as. Again, what a beautiful machine that is, and none of them were saved. Next one is a really early one. This is known as the Johnson/Dealey, whatever you want to call it, 060. Yeah, there were loads and loads of these produced, and we'll talk more about that later on. But unfortunately, every single one was cut up, which is tragic, really, isn't it? The next one, quite a popular engine. Once again, none of these were preserved. It's the S&DJR 2P, also from the LMS, though, which is why I put it from the LMS locomotives. Next up then, the biggest tragedy ever, and I mean that literally because it is absolutely huge. It is, of course, the Bayer Garrett. Now, once again, there's probably a few good reasons why these were all cut up. I mean, obviously, they're big. You can't just bung them in your shed, can you? Although most of these, that's true. But yeah, it's going to be a logistical nightmare to keep one of those around. And also, of course, because of the axle boxes, they were a massive point of failure on these. And so, presumably, that's a good reason why none of those were kept around. Either way, there we go. That is some of the LMS region scrappers, as you can see. Now we'll move on and do a bit of Great Western. So as you can see, all of the Great Western locos that are preserved, at least that I own, are right here in front of me. And the reason for that is absolutely loads of Great Western locos were preserved, to the annoyance of LNER fans and other fans of other railways. But luckily, yes, we do have many classes, but here are some that we do not have anymore. So this is the county class, first of all. This is a 460. Very few of the Great Western 460s were entirely scrapped, but that is one of them. Then we have the County of Flint. That's also a county class, but the 440 county. For me personally, I think it's a great shame that none of those were preserved, because they're gorgeous things, aren't they? Another popular 460 that was not preserved is the Grange class. It's like a baby hall, if I remember correctly. None of those were preserved. Terrible shame. Then we have the Dean single, I believe it is. Again, what a gorgeous machine to have all been cut up. I think there was a static replica built at one point of one of those, but it never ran. So, yes, take that as you will. And then we have this. I think this is known as the ROD 280 or the Great Western 3000 class. None of the Great Western versions of this locomotive were preserved. Possibly some other builds from the ROD might have been, but none of the Great Western ones were. So yeah, maybe it's a bit dodgy including that one, but I have, so there. Next up then, some Southern region stuff, and for whatever reason, I don't have many unpreserved Southern engines. So the first one is a personal favourite of mine, as 50% of my entire collection is basically. It's the Drummond 700 class, a very early pre-grouping Southern region locomotive. Originally, was it from the LSWR, I believe? Beautiful locomotive, great shame. Here's everyone's favourite. I have no idea why. It's almost as though it appeared on TV for years as a character of some description. I don't know why. But it's the E2, as you can tell, absolutely gorgeous in the LBSC brown there. All of those were cut up, although in real life they were terrible steamers apparently. In fiction, they're much loved, but in real life they were not, and I suppose that might be partly why none of them were saved. Then we have this, the L1 440, don't know much about those, but well, I guess that's why, because they were all scrapped. Now this is a beauty, look at this one. What a shame that is, that none of those were saved. That is of course the LBSC H1. There are similar Atlantics that have been preserved. C1 is one, I think the NRM owns it, don't they? But yeah, none of the H1s were preserved. And then we have one BR standard locomotive. I believe this is the standard class 3 tank. Apparently none of those were preserved, which is unusual. Most of the BR standard designs, or at least most of the well-known ones, have been preserved, but that's one that wasn't. So there we go. That is my collection of scrapped/lost locomotives. I hope you enjoyed seeing that. Now I'm going to choose some and get them running for you. So sit back, hope you enjoy it, and yeah, we'll relax and get some engines running. And I'll tell you about them too. And here comes the first engine now. Yes, I couldn't resist getting the largest loco I've ever owned running again. It is, of course, yes, the Bayer Garrett. And the first LMS Garretts were ordered from Bayer, Peacock and Company, and they were built in 1927. The LMS decided to employ such huge locomotives, their 260 plus 260s, due to the fact that they had previously double or even triple-headed locomotives in order to shift larger loads, which obviously was quite uneconomical. A total of 33 Garretts were built for heavy freight duties between 1927 and 1930, the LMS ones that is, and they had a relatively short working life. By the end of 1955, withdrawal was well underway, and the final example had been withdrawn and scrapped by 1958, of course with no survivors. So I still think this is fantastic. Yeah, as models, I mean, they are a bit flawed. The quality's not amazing on them, but frankly, I'm just so happy that mine works. Anyway, I'll leave that one going and I'll show you what's next. Here's engine number 2 then. This is one that I don't run very often, but I should because it's beautiful. So this is a B17 from the LNER in BR green, and these were designed by Sir Nigel Gresley, and this would be his first and only class of 460s, which is very interesting. They were first built in 1928 for passenger work on the LNER, and these were intended to replace and improve on the older B12 class, yet not exceed the weight restrictions on most parts of the railway in order to maintain their versatility. Interestingly, the front driving axle was driven as well as the middle ones by a third internal cylinder, and this was another attempt to reduce the weight of the design, known as divided drive of course. In total, 73 were produced between 1928 and 1937. All members of the class were scrapped, as is true with every loco you've seen today, although the B17 Steam Locomotive Trust do have intentions of recreating a member of the class. So what do you reckon to that then? I think Gresley should have done more 460s, what do you reckon? Nice one, very nice. Next up then, another beautiful engine that I've not really showed very much since I reviewed it. So this is the Johnson 3F, a very attractive 060 tender engine from the Midland Railway. The classification of these engines as a 3F took place long after the engines were initially built though. This particular example was originally known as the Midland Railway M or 1873 class, which was first introduced way back in 1892 to the design of Samuel W. Johnson. The Johnson 060 was basically an umbrella term for many similar classes from the same designer, the earliest of which dated back to 1875. 935 of these 060s were constructed in total, which is an astonishing amount, especially for the time. I mean, we're talking 1800s here. Steam wasn't getting that big until many years in the future. It was actually one of the largest classes of engine on Britain's railways. As with many of the Midland Railway locomotives, these passed into LMS ownership following the grouping of 1923, and while many did survive into the British Railways era, none of them remain preserved today, which is obviously really unlucky given just how many were built. Crikey, looks like a scene from Barry Scrapyard or something, doesn't it? Which is quite fitting, I suppose, with the theme of the video. Either way, there we go, first 3 engines. Hope you enjoyed seeing those. Yeah, quite lovely, aren't they, actually? It's definitely not as though only the nicer steam locos were preserved. Yeah, definitely not true. Either way, I'm going to set up 3 more. What do you reckon? We'll have a bit more running. I'm enjoying this. And which ones to choose, though? That's the thing. Right, I'll do it. Okay, we are back with another LNER locomotive. This is quite a nice one actually. It's got a very largely proportioned boiler given the size of the rest of the engine. This is the LNER K3, originally known as the Great Northern H4, which was produced just a few years before the 1923 grouping in 1920 to the design of Sir Nigel Gresley. An impressive 193 were built in total over 17 years, and after grouping the class became a part of the LNER, where they remained until 1945, when good old Edward Thompson, I don't think so, rebuilt one member of the class into a new K5 2-cylinder design, but for whatever reason this was the only example ever to be converted, and the class went on to survive well into the BR era, where they were eventually withdrawn in the late 1950s/early 1960s, and sadly they were all scrapped with no survivors. So we can't do a British steam video without talking about Great Western locomotives. Many Great Western tender engines were preserved, but this is one that was not. This is the Grange class, one of the later 460s of the Great Western, and it was introduced for mixed traffic in 1936, and 80 were built over a total of 3 years. Although the class was new, some parts from older classes, the withdrawn 4300 class for example, were used to construct them. Effectively, the Granges were a smaller version of the well-known Hall class, which made them much more suitable for those restricted routes. They therefore utilised the same design of the Hall, which was considerably old at the time. Nevertheless, they proved to be extremely reliable and effective for most duties. Sadly, all of the Granges were withdrawn and scrapped during the early 1960s, although just like the B17, a brand new Grange is currently being built. Last then, one of my favourite engines of all time, as you well know. No sarcasm whatsoever there. This of course is the gorgeous O2 Tango from Helgen. So the Gresley O2, originated from the Great Northern Railway just a few years before grouping took place, and of course then the Great Northern became a part of the LNER. The class was designed by Sir Nigel Gresley, and 67 of them were built in total over a massive 25-year span. Designed for heavy freight, the O2s were extremely large for the period, and they featured a powerful 3-cylinder layout. Although the design was deemed highly successful, all members of the class were withdrawn and scrapped between 1948 and 1963, of course in order to make way for the diesels. So there you have it then, folks, my sort of ultimate edition of lost locomotives. Yes, it's a pretty sad subject, I would say, but overall, it's nice seeing these things in model form, isn't it? Sorry, I'm just a bit distracted. That brake van looks like it's derailed for some reason. Not to worry. But yeah, let me know anyway, which was your favourite of the ones I ran. I'll put up a poll. Although I can only have 5 in the poll, so I'll have to miss one out, so I'll pick the least popular. Which could that be? But no, overall, yeah, that was really interesting. Some of these, the Grange for example, I'd forgotten, hadn't been preserved, and so it was quite interesting to look over some of those. Anyway, folks, thank you for your company, thanks for watching. As always, hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any other ideas for videos I should do, be sure to let me have them down below in the comment section. But for the time being, have a great week. I'll see you very soon. Let's see if I can get that Grange in one last time. There she is. Yeah, they've all behaved themselves pretty well today, haven't they? Alright, cheers folks. Have a great week. See you next time.